So on the CT175, I've got two tanks side by side. This is the original tank that was on the motorcycle. I had every intention and desire to use that throughout the rebuild process, but this is what I had coming out of the inside of that, and the more I worked on it, the more this thing fell apart. Right now I've got this spot right here that I think it's just paint and clear coat that's holding that together, so there's no structural integrity left in that tank, which is unfortunate. That forced me to go to the salvage yard where I found this tank. Same model year, same color scheme, everything is the same, except this has, unfortunately, some surface damage. I'm going to have some auto body work done on that, which is going to force me to sand this whole thing and repaint it. So I won't be keeping this original patina that's kind of occurred over the years. The important thing for me on this tank was the integrity of the inside. And I don't know if you can actually see that. I'll try and put some still photos in this video, but this thing here, you can see just barely some surface rust, maybe a little glazing in there. This tank is in much better shape than the original tank that was on here. So my plan is to clean out the inside. I was going to use the gravel technique for that, but as I was talking to the owner of the salvage yard, he suggested that I use screws. He said throw a couple handfuls of sheet metal screws in there or wood screws, get your power washer out, blast that water down in there. It's going to throw those screws around. It's going to create a hell of a racket, but it's going to scour the inside of this tank. When you're done with that, it says follow with a muriatic acid wash, and when you're done with that, rinse it out, throw some rubbing alcohol or some acetone or something that will kind of dissipate that water, get that out of there, let it dry thoroughly, and then I'm going to follow it with a liner, a liquid liner that you put in here. I think he suggested cream, but I'm going to use that or something similar to that, and then we'll have a tank that's as good as new. So I've been cleaning the inside of the tank, and I started with the dry technique using these screws, and here's my progress so far. Really, this tank only has a bunch of superficial rust on the inside of it. So to do this, I threw all those screws inside the tank, plugged up the holes. This is where the gas cap was. This is where the fuel shutoff valve goes. And I threw it in there, and then I just started shaking the crap out of that thing. It's really loud, so I put on earmuffs, kind of deaden the sound. And to do it, you just put the screws in and you just start shaking this thing and turn it on its side, turn it upside down, stand it up, any way you can. The only thing that I am seeing, it's a little bit challenging with the dry technique to actually get this surface right here. This is where the frame comes up through down the center of this tank. And you really can't get the screws sitting right on that surface and scratch it. But I've looked in here and it looks to be doing a pretty good job. So my next step is to take all of these screws, put them back in that tank and get the power washer out. And then I'll just blast water in there, and the whole theory behind that is it picks these screws up and just kind of throws them around in this vicious slurry, and it'll continue to scrape the side of the tank. The tank is just about done. All it needs is a paint job. It spent the day at the auto shop with my buddy, and he got me all squared away. This thing is nice and smooth. And then I brought it home and finished cleaning the inside of the gas tank. The first thing I did was I gave it a muriatic acid wash. Now that stuff is nasty. So all of the warnings about fumes and wearing gloves and ventilation, heed those warnings, because that is bad stuff. But it was amazing. When I threw it in there and sloshed it around, the stuff that was coming out looked like weak coffee. So that was nice. I followed that up by a water wash. It's cold outside, so I had to do that in the tub in my house. But if you had a hose, you could sit and wash all that out. Spend a few minutes doing that. And then, to get all that water out, followed it up with a couple of acetone rinses. That helps dissipate the water. That way the tank can dry out without rusting. Now the only thing left for this is to put the tank liner in there, and it'll be ready to put back on the bike. I'm getting ready to put the tank liner in, and I need to do a couple of things to prep the tank. First off, I need to be able to plug all of the holes. So the bottom here where the fuel shutoff valve is, I'm just going to take a piece of inner tube here from the little tires, and I'm going to make a little gasket here, and then I'll build a little stop block to go on top of there. So basically I just need to figure out where these two holes are right here and get a rough idea of how big that surface is. Then I'll take and cut a gasket, essentially that same shape, with two holes in it there. Then I'll have a solid piece of wood or plastic, something I can bolt down using the bolts that fit here, and that'll create a nice seal for that. On the other side, obviously I need to be able to plug up the gas cap, or the fuel hole. So what I've also done here is taken another piece of that same inner tube, and I found a dowel, and the dowel plus the inner tube when shoved in there creates a pretty decent seal. Now it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but the manufacturer says you need to roll this around and kind of set it on different sides to allow that liner to form the coat. partway through the process of putting this liquid liner in this tank, and the manufacturer suggests that you set the tank for 8 to 10 minutes per side to allow that coating to adhere to the tank. So this process is taking a long time. I would say probably an hour to an hour and a half minimum I would count on doing this. What I've done, as I've rotated this, I've put an X on the areas that have been on the bottom. So I've got an X there. This is actually the side of the tank, but I've placed an X there. Then I can keep track of which sides have been allowed to sit for that 8 to 10 minutes while it coats. I'm finished with the first coat, and truth be known, I'm probably into this 2 hours by the time I rotated this, tried to cover all of the sides. I wasn't too sure how much of this was going to be left over after this coating kind of worked its way around. So we're going to see how much is remaining. Ideally, the manufacturer suggests that you do this twice, and certainly if you've got enough, that's not a bad idea. Initially, I've looked in here and my impressions are this is pretty good. It looks like it's a real even coat. I was afraid that it was going to be a little too viscous or a little too thick and may not get some of the raised surfaces that you can't actually pull the tank liner on. But those look real good. So now we're going to pull this off. I'm going to save this because if I have enough of this, I'm going to put a second coat in here. So we'll see how much we have left after we pour it back into the bottle. And according to the instructions, this is totally allowable. You can keep reusing this stuff. So here we are. This is after pouring out what was remaining in there from the first coat. So it only used a quarter, maybe a third. There's definitely enough in there for another coat for this tank. My tank, just for reference, is a 1.8 gallon tank. They say this will do from 1 to 5 gallon tanks without any issues. So I'm going to let this dry, and then when I get a chance, I'm going to start the whole process over again. Here's what the final results look like on the tank. This is after my second coat, and I am really impressed with the way this stuff worked out. If you look at the bottle here, I've just made some reference marks as to how much I've used, and each time it was about a third of a bottle. There's still a third left, but that's definitely not enough to do another round, and there's no indication from the instructions and from the manufacturer that you should try 3 coats. So I'm really happy with the way the liner turned out. I did have one issue that I'm still a little bit bothered by, but I'm just going to have to live with it. This paint that I used is from a spray can, and it's a real high quality paint. I love it. It's good stuff. The manufacturer of that paint suggests that you bake this for an hour at 200 degrees. Well, I had already put the liner in there, so I was a little concerned about its durability during that baking process. I called the manufacturer, and unfortunately I wasn't impressed with their technical answer when I asked them if it would hold up to 200 degrees for an hour. If you look at one of the warnings on the bottle here, it says not for tanks containing liquids above 238 degrees Fahrenheit. Initially I thought, well, that's my answer, I'm good to go. I called them. Unfortunately, I had to call them 3 times before I could get them to give me a firm answer, and each time that I talked to them, the answer was kind of him-hawing around as if they really didn't quite know. So if they're listening, I would recommend you kind of get a grasp on that. They told me 170 degrees, but only briefly, and that's about as high as you could take this before it would start to break down. So unfortunately, I didn't get to bake the paint like that manufacturer had recommended, so I'm just going to have to live with that, but that's okay. anyways, it's ready to go. I've just got a few things to put on the gas tank, like the gas cap and the fuel shutoff valve, and I'll be ready to put this back on the motorcycle. Thanks for watching.